Welcome and thank you for coming today. Welcome to Discover Rising Tides. My name is Jeanne Gallagher and this is Discover Rising Tides, how the outside makes the inside better. And I'm excited for today's conversation because it's a little bit different. We're going to have a three-person conversation today. Denise and I are going to be talking with Lauren. And so Lauren, please introduce yourself and give us a little bit of your background and then we'll get started.
Awesome. I'm so glad to be here, Jeanne. Thanks so much for having me. And Denise, thank you for connecting us. That's awesome. So I am Lauren Yellin Weinberg. My business is called Lasting Change Wellness. And I am a psychologist and a trained family therapist. And I did that for years, but then I was home for 20 years. And within the past, 7, 8 years, I found coaching. And these days I work as a coach and a speaker and a corporate facilitator, and I love all the hats that I get to wear, and they're all informed by my background, but I feel like I have a little bit of a different focus now.
That's really wonderful. And the transition, I want to talk a little bit about the transition between going from your career as it was to your coaching career and how different it is, and does that open up opportunities for you? And then, but before we start that's kind of the focus that I'd like to start with. But before we get there, I really want to talk about why the three of us are here on the screen together and the connection between both you and Denise and how this all happened.
So this is fantastic. This is the beauty of networking and connection. I mean, true connection, getting to talk to people face to face, whether it's, initially on Zoom, on the phone, or in Lauren and I's case, in our case, we get to see each other every year, literally face to face, where we get to hug each other. So connection is so important. And especially for women, oftentimes we feel very alone. Lauren said she was in, she had her busy career and then she was a stay-at-home mom for 20 years. And then that transition can be really, really lonely, and having connections, new connections to help through that transition is really important. And that's really when Lauren and I met. Lauren was in transition as a coach. I was transitioning with Living Healthy List. And we were just really fortunate to have another friend who knew each of us, that connected us, and instantly Lauren and I became friends and colleagues, and it's been a wonderful relationship for me, having Lauren as someone I can talk to, who I can rely on if I have a question or if I just want to talk. We're really good at that.
And back at you, Denise. I love that you frame it as connection and relationship, because truly that is the crux of what I do in my work. What I like to say is that I give people heart-centered tools to foster that connection. And whether it's connection to yourself, which is what I do in my individual coaching, or connection with other people, which is what I do more when I work with corporations. It's the basis of everything. And we know now from so much research how important connection is, right? So I love that you brought me into this circle, brought me into deepening the connections that you have with Jeanne and even with the people who are listening, because it happens on so many different levels, right? So I think that listening to a podcast and letting it be your favorite podcast and coming back again and again, that is a deep form of connection that helps people feel anchored and not so alone. So it all counts. It all works so wonderfully. And yeah, it's just luck that it was Suzanne who introduced us, and she just happened to be there when I was doing a speaking engagement. She was one of the speakers as well. And sometimes it's luck, or is it intervention? I don't know. But it brought us all to this moment. So yeah. I'm so grateful.
Connecting is something that I think that we're missing. Over the last, I don't know, however long, social media has really played a part in our everyday moments, our everyday lives, but I think it's more everyday moments. We are becoming much more isolated. And I think that it really became evident through COVID and now being post-COVID. It's funny. I remember quite a while ago, way back before Starbucks was on every corner. But when they started to become popular, the idea was, how do we create a space where people can get together and talk? And it really blossomed the coffee shop thought process. And it is that need for connecting way before social media became such an awful influence. I like to use that word term. I'm struggling with social media right now, so I guess I have some issues with that I need to work through. But that need for connecting is so important for that grounding, whether it's personal, professional, or both.
First of all, I will say about social media, it's a tool like anything else in the world, and we have to learn to use it properly. And part of the problem is that there was a whole generation of people who were introduced to this tool before we had a way to talk about it. I mean, like, we know how to use a stove, and we talk about the parameters of how to use a stove, and you don't get close to the burners. They're hot, they'll hurt you. But this thing was developing before we had language to teach people. It's like AI. A lot of people are terrified of AI, but I'm sure people felt that way about calculators too, right? At some point, like, oh my God, people aren't going to be able to do math anymore. And, I think that it's just about having language that helps people understand the parameters of how to use something in a beneficial way, and how those tools can hurt you if you're not careful. And I think we'll get there. So I don't think we have to throw out the entire baby with the bathwater.
Interestingly, when you read or watch the story about how Facebook, or the Facebook as it was originally called, how that came about, it really was supposed to be about connecting, kids in a college, like connecting them with each other. And so we've kind of gone full circle, right? It was supposed to be about connecting, yet now we're using it, but we're not exactly using it, or connecting appropriately. We have lots of friends and likes, but we don't actually know those people. And I think that's really where the challenge is when it comes to connection, wherever you're connecting with people, is we actually need to put some effort into it. It doesn't just happen, connecting with someone. Sure, I have a whole list of people, in a networking group, but how many of them do I actually know? How many of them, do I know their kids? Or, what they're, that they have kids, where they live, what do they like to do outside of work? I had an interesting conversation with a client the other day, and she is transitioning from a stay-at-home mom back into the work world. And she was at a networking event. Usually it was a dinner event. And she said she almost froze when people would come up to her and say, "So what do you do? What do you do?" And so she decided we talked about this, and we decided to reframe that question and ask, tell me more about you, because it actually invites the person in for a real conversation, rather than, what do you do? I'm a coach. End of conversation, right? So again, I think that we need to put more effort into connecting and making those connections really meaningful.
Well, that's interesting that you said that, because the what do you do, usually, open-ended versus closed-ended questions, right? An open-ended question is the newspaper things, who, what, where, why, and how. But when you say, what do you do, it almost is a closed-ended question, because it can be answered with a simple one word or one phrase. And then it is difficult to, especially if you're in transition or coming out of just starting something, to expand on that.
It's true, but I love the fact that you said that you have to make an effort, and I'm going to come back around to this way that we talk about those questions, because they're actually it's been shown, like, there is research that's been shown, and I know I lived this as well, that people who just expect connections to happen end up with fewer connections, and they're more unhappy in general as people. But when you understand that you have control over going out and creating those connections,
Mm.
then you suddenly, have this efficacy, you have this empowerment. And that's the basis for everything I do, really, is empowerment, right? It's offering you tools so that you feel that you have control over your life, over your environment, over your internal states, right? That's empowerment, feeling like you have a choice that you can make and you have the tools to help you make that. So knowing that you can make the effort, that you can go out, you can create that environment where you're meeting people and you're connecting. And it is terrifying. As somebody who made the transition not that long ago, it is terrifying. And you almost don't know how, and it doesn't get easier when you think about it that way. Like, what do you do? Like, what do you mean? When? Like,
Right.
how long can I go back? But and having the confidence to say, wait a minute, I can take control of this moment, because you can even answer that and say, well, before I tell you what I do, like, let's just talk about what our favorite thing was that happened yesterday. Or, tell me something that you are passionate about, and I'll tell you something that I'm passionate about. Like, you can actually take control of that conversation. You don't have to answer the question that somebody asked you if it makes you uncomfortable. Right? So be intentional about how you show up and connect with people, knowing that you can create that moment the way that it's meaningful to you.
I love that you don't have to answer the question exactly as it was asked, because quite often we feel, whoa, now we're in the hot seat because the question came to us. But how do we reframe that question to create a platform for more conversation? And that the work networking thing is so yucky, because that's my professional term for it. Just, it's yucky. It can be yucky because it's so superficial, and there's not a lot of, in the beginning, there's just not a lot of relationship building conversations that's happening, because quite often it is that sales. It can be that sales moment, the 30-second elevator speech, and those things that can create a very superficial conversation.
It can, but again, like, that's something you have control over, because I find when I go to these events, which just the decision to go, that's a decision, right? Just to go to events, to go places where you're going to meet people, right there, that's a decision. And then to follow through, get dressed, get up, go out, like, that's a decision. But I find that people often say to me, oh my God, I can't believe we're talking about this in this context. Like, I didn't expect to be talking about this today, because I go deep. That's just who I am. I like to go deep. I don't even know how to sort of go shallow. That's an awkward space for me to be. And so I'm always looking in those moments. I think of networking truly as like creating a net, like creating a safety net. Like, if you think about it that way, it doesn't become so odious anymore, right? Like, I'm creating a connective tissue, like a connective net that's going to help hold me. And I try to like think about it like that, because it's not, even for extroverts, it's not always the most comfortable. It's like a contrived, it can be a contrived setting, right? So it's not always just like a natural place to be. But like, if you latch on to something and you ask a follow-up, one of those open-ended questions that you mentioned, Jeanne, like you start to go in, you start to make these inroads. And then, like, my goal when I go to a networking event is never to meet everybody in the room. It's to connect with one or two people more deeply and find a way that we're going to follow up on that. So it's always about relationship building. It's just how you approach it.
Love the fact that you can make the decision to make whatever this, whether it's a networking or whatever the social event is, you can decide what you want from it. And you can decide how you're going to even create the event. You're there. What do you want to get from it? What do you want to give? And so I love that you empower people to do that just by telling us that, to change, just to change the whole perspective of networking, to, throwing it as out as a net, as a net that is safety net. I love that concept. Because when I agree, when you think of networking, it's kind of like out there reaching out as opposed to bringing in.
Totally.
Yeah.
Like and you're working and like it has the word working in it. That doesn't sound fun at all, right?
Right.
But what you said is so important to connection in general. You made the distinction between getting and giving. And
Mhm.
I think that this is important even if you're connecting with people with whom you work. It's the difference between being in relationship and having a transactional relationship. And thinking about people, well, what can I get from you? What can I get from you that's going to help me go do something? What's going to bring me value? As opposed to how can I give you value? Because I think if you
Mhm.
show with that mindset that what can I offer you? What value can I give? You will get everything you need. You're going to get it. It's going to happen. But when you show with that open heart, again, it's about having that open heart of really showing up in a space, dare I say it, of love. Like, I think love deserves to be in every space. You certainly can talk about that more if you'd like. But if you show up with that loving, open heart of what can I give, then you're
Mm.
always in that space, holding that space with an open heart. And that's always a good place to be.
I really love that because quite often the thought process is I'm going networking. And going networking is a loose term because quite right now we're doing so much online networking as well in a group of a bazillion people, and you go into breakout groups. And still the thought process, well, maybe for me anyways, is how many people can I talk to? I love how you've restated this to it more is not better. Number one, the deeper the conversations are better, but instead of going in what can I get out of this, I love the who can I serve while I'm there, and what three people, to simplify it but also define it more, what three people can I be in contact with through this event that I can help?
Beautiful.
Mhm.
Love it.
Perfect.
I'd like to bring this back to something that you said a minute ago, Lauren, about love. And
Mm.
in much of what I have read and studied, there's two things. There's love and there's fear. So much of what we do in the world, we do out of fear. We're afraid of looking a certain way. We're afraid of not being smart enough, not being enough, all of that fear base. But when we look at life situations, networking, conversations, connection from a place of love, the fear goes away. And I think in this day and age, I agree, if we looked at things more from through the rose-colored glasses of love as opposed to the dark-colored glasses of fear, we would all be healthier and happier, and we'd have more meaningful connections.
Well, and I love that you said that. I think that's beautiful. But I'm going to just tweak a little bit. Like, it's not necessarily about the rose-colored glasses, only because, well, we think of love as having to do with pink and hearts and, flowers. But, rose-colored glasses has that connotation that there's something sort of Pollyanna about it. There's something that's not really grounded.
That's true.
And
Mm.
I feel like, first of all, I will say that the opposite of love is not necessarily fear, and it's not necessarily hate. I think a lot of people think the opposite of love is hate. Hate comes from fear, but under fear is something else. Under fear is separation. And I think that that's truly the
Mm.
opposite side of love, is this sense that we are not connected. And it's a mistake that people make. It's an easy mistake. It's a human mistake. It's common human thing. I like to think about it like this. Imagine that we're all icebergs. And the part you can see above the water, that's the very human part of us, which a lot of people refer to as ego, right? And it's not necessarily like conceited ego. It's just the part that's aware, right? You have the part that has all those human needs and the part that makes you individual. Maybe it's your talents and your gifts and abilities, right? It's the part that makes us seem separate. Because if you looked at an ocean with all these icebergs, the peaks would all be separate. Underneath, they are all swimming in that same water. They are all deeply connected, and they get bigger as it goes down, right? So maybe they're even connected to the ocean floor. And what's that stuff is, that's love. That is the stuff that truly connects us. We are all so much more similar. We are all connected in the parts that we don't show, in the parts that don't make us individuals, the parts that make us all similar. And if we can remember that truly we're connected by love, and you start there, then maybe we wouldn't be having all of this crazy stuff that we see going on in the world right now and going on right here, in our backyards, of people feeling so separate, and that anybody different, like you're not connected to those people who are other and over there. The truth is we're all connected, and we're all connected by love. And when people feel separate, I always say it's a problem of not enough love for yourself. Truly, when you are connected, Maya Angelou has a quote. It's something like, the goal is to belong nowhere. And what she really means by that, yeah, right? And it sounds challenging, but it was part of an interview, and there's like a longer part to what she says about that. But it's basically getting at that when you recognize that the only place you need to truly feel at home is with yourself, then you have that home. You're like a turtle. You have that home everywhere that you go. You've got that, your heart, you've got, like, if you fill yourself up from the inside, then you are going to feel at home wherever you are, because you are your home. And that illusion of separateness begins to melt away, because when we're confident and comfortable and feel good about ourselves, the parts we love and the parts maybe that we don't love so much. But when we can reconcile that and still love ourselves fully, we don't feel separate anymore. We recognize that we're just part of the fabric, right? We just are a unique part of the fabric that intertwines all of us.
How do we recognize that? How do we recognize that we're missing that, or that we should be realizing a different situation?
Well, I think it's, anytime you're showing up somewhere with that sense of giving in order to get, right? Like people who are, some people call them people pleasers. Some people call them somebody with a big heart, right? And they might even be seen as somebody with a big heart, ironically. Like they always want to give to other people. Give, and they don't fill themselves up. Truly, they're giving to other people as a way of getting appreciation, acceptance, belonging. Like when you can give without expecting anything in return, then you know you've arrived. So when you feel yourself wondering, oh, is this enough? Right? Or what Denise said, like recognizing, oh, those thoughts in your head, maybe I'm not enough. Maybe I'm not smart enough, good enough. Or, people talk a lot these days about like imposter phenomenon. Like, oh, they're going to find me out. Like, so there's a disconnect between the thoughts that you have in your head and how you want to feel, or just the feeling in your heart or your gut and how you want to. That's when
Is giving without
to do something.
Is giving without expecting something back difficult? It seems difficult to me, or maybe I'm revealing something I shouldn't be. But it seems it's an easy statement to say, but it almost seems very difficult to truly, genuinely feel.
Yeah, and I'm not saying the goal is like perfection. I mean, very few people are Mother Teresa, right? Or Gandhi or something. But there's what happens when you do the work on yourself, when you connect deeply with yourself, is that you see it sooner. And then you can check yourself and say, all right, wait a minute, do I really need this? Right? Do I really need to be accepted by that person who may not really think I'm all that in a bag of chips? Maybe we're not just on the same, wavelength. Like there have to be people that you're willing to, because you can't just give all the time, right? Or you can't always be showing up in a way, doing a tap dance and a song to get noticed or seen in order to feed yourself, to make yourself feel good. Because it's like a sieve. It's just going to go through. You're just going to need to keep filling that up, The only way is to plug those holes. And when you plug those holes and you truly accept and love yourself, it's not so hard. Then you can give truly without, like, I'm going to give, and whatever happens, happens. And it becomes more okay. It becomes easier. And if you are feeling like, oh, but I hope, you catch yourself. Oh, wait, what? What am I hoping?
Oh, I like that.
It made me think just a second ago about, how we love our children. Okay, in my case, my niece and my nephew, unconditionally, right? It doesn't matter, you give to them, you don't expect them to give you a lot back. Yes, you hope they're going to love you and respect you and all of that, but you give unconditionally, out of love and out of connection and out of respect. So I think sometimes when we're talking about the different relationships, that may change a little bit, whether, you're in a networking event or you're with friends and family. So, as Lauren said, there was one Mother Teresa, one Gandhi, in that respect, they were two perfect people in the world, trying to help others and gave and gave and gave and expected nothing in return. Most of us are not those people. So when we can give from our hearts, give from our hearts. And those times when we're not feeling it, maybe that's the time to, to step back and to say, what's going on there? Not to berate yourself or, with any guilt, but question, curiosity.
You made an assumption there. I would, will say, Denise, like, I mean, you ideally love your children unconditionally. I don't think that's true. I think that's why Carl Rogers came up with, humanism and this idea of having therapy that just is unconditional positive regard, because most people don't give unconditionally because we're raised by people and people are human, and humans have that separation thing. They have their own needs that they feel aren't being met. They're, above the water. There are those parts that make them feel separate from everybody. And sure, you can get closer, right, with certain relationships that you have to that unconditional love. But very few of us are able to completely give that perfectly. And again, it's awareness. You're building awareness so that you can catch yourself when you're giving in a way that you're expecting something back. I mean, that's what guilt is all about, right? I mean, hello, like we know there's quite a few people, groups of people who are known for slinging guilt alongside the love, right? Here's your love with a side of guilt. I mean, it's not the perfect.
Isn't that what's supposed to happen?
I mean, it's complicated. Relationships are complicated, but relationships are always the thing. And that's the part that I think is so important to remember. If you remember that the most important thing is the relationship, then it changes all the choices you make after that. Like the relationship is always the significant thing. Then it's less important to be right? It's less important to get as opposed to give. Like you just got to keep that in mind, that the relationship is always what matters, not control. Not like there's so many layers to what we inject into relationships. And we would tell you, I mean, I was that person. I would have told you at one point that my family was the most important thing in the world to me, but I wasn't acting like it. When I was home for those 20 years that I was home, you would think I had nothing else to think about, but I ended up volunteering. I ran everything, and I let the busyness of my life take control of my judgment of how I provided for my family, of how I gave to my children, of the quality of time and attention and love that I gave. And I had my need, because I wasn't living in my purpose. My need was to be seen and valued. Like, I'm this smart person who went to 8 years of graduate school, and now I'm like an at-home mom. What? Like, I felt like I was getting lost and I wasn't being seen. And so when I gave volunteering to my family, whatever it was with this need of being seen and valued, basic human need, to be seen and valued. And I was giving short shrift to my family. I would yell at my kids so much. I mean, that's not how you treat people who are the most important, love objects of your life. So again, it's, we get lost in the fog of this separateness. Tara Brach talks a lot about this. Love her, but we get lost in this story and we forget what truly matters to us. And that's why it's so important to know what your values are, to keep them front and center, to question every day, am I living into what I say is truly important to me? This is a lot of what my coaching program focuses on, is filling up those holes, like learning to love and accept ourselves so that we can completely give to other people more unconditionally.
Interestingly,
something that you said there. Oh, go ahead, Denise.
Well, I was just going to say, interestingly, so with Lauren's coaching, I've known Lauren for a while, and so she has considers herself, with her business, the becoming coach. She helps women, empowers women while they're on their journey, to who they are becoming. And I think that's really important to mention, because Lauren, you've been talking about that. You've been talking about it, who are we becoming? We're not perfect today. So my husband Mark has a t-shirt that says better than yesterday. Right. And, it's a reminder, and you're giving us this reminder that we're not perfect, but every day, every relationship, or every connection, we can get better, incrementally. And, it can grow into, who are you becoming? There's no real destination. We keep growing. We keep becoming, right? There's more and more and more that we can do, love, have, be. I just ran out of breath.
I'm cracking up because clearly I need to become better and better at marketing myself. So
that's why we have Denise.
That's why I think I'm going to insist Denise come with me on every interview. Yes, as the becoming coach. I mean, that is the point, right? It's not about perfection. It's being a little bit better every day. And I say that we are all of us a masterpiece that's never going to be finished, meaning that we are a masterpiece. And the thing it's that we've forgotten. We don't need to add things to understand how perfect and worthy we are. We need to take things away. We have filled up. I like to think of it as this, like we're born these perfect creatures who can love and be loved. That's all they want. That's all babies want, right? Besides eating and pooping, they just want to love and be loved. And, we're all born that perfect creature, but we have this box, and the box gets filled up with junk. It's not in us. It's outside of us. But we forget because we're so attached to this box. And the box is all the doubt and all the judgment and all the fear and all the concern and all the unworthiness. And the truth is that we can learn to lighten that box. We can learn to move that box and to remember who we are underneath, right? It's like that story of the Golden Buddha and the town in Thailand that was being overrun with marauders. I just like that word. And so they covered this giant golden Buddha statue with mud and clay so that nobody who was invading them would understand how valuable it was. But then they forgot. There's so much time went by, they forgot. And it wasn't until they were moving this statue and they accidentally dropped it that some of the clay dropped off and they could see the gold underneath. I mean, that's what I do when I coach. I try to help everybody remember that they are shining underneath. In fact, my coaching program is called Shine. And I truly believe that when you shine, you light up the world around you. And it's just helping people remember, helping them remember to connect to their inner wisdom. Denise had mentioned that before, like paying attention when there's something that doesn't feel right, like trusting the inner wisdom and respecting yourself enough that you're taking the very best care of yourself first. And that really, like all of that joins together, like to help you, become this person that is like, I'm always toward that masterpiece, just becoming better and better.
So your transition through your corporate or I'm going to say professional career to your coaching career, which doesn't mean it's less professional, but it's just defined differently. Did that give you, what I'm hearing from you too, is that your coaching program is called Shine, but I honestly think that helped you shine yourself in that transition. Would that be true?
Oh, completely. First, I was a therapist before, but
Okay.
I wouldn't be doing this work if it wasn't for the work that I did on myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it all started with, well, it started with how I think I mentioned this to you when we spoke, Jeanne, like it started with how I spoke to myself. And we all do it. We all say things to ourselves that we would never say to any other living person. We're so unkind in the way that we talk to ourselves. And for me, it wasn't just what I said to myself, it was how I spoke about myself in front of other people. I often made myself the butt of the joke, or I would just, you know, put myself down in some kind of subtle way. And I was lucky enough to have a dear friend who heard me like saying that repeatedly. And it's because of how I was feeling inside. I mean, these things are connected. I wasn't feeling good about being home, right? And not yet feeling valued and seen. And it came out in the way that I spoke about myself. And my friend said, stop talking about yourself. And I did. I was so lucky that I heard her. I feel like it was maybe a little angel on my shoulder that I heard her, and I started to catch myself whenever I was saying or thinking something negative about myself. I would neutralize that thought and I would dump it. I would get rid of it. I call that catch and release now. It's a huge part of my coaching program. People find it enormously helpful. You don't have to go through this whole rigmarole of making friends with your inner voice and your thing. And, you know, you catch it, just say, you know, okay, so I feel like an imposter. And then you say, well, there's always a ramp up, right? The neutralizing is that there's always a ramp up when you learn something new, or it's going to take time to really grow into this role. That's, I'm stretching myself. I'm just out of my comfort zone. I'm going to let it go and know that I could always ask for help. I could always learn something new. I can trust myself to figure it out. I mean, it's that simple, right? So I was lucky that that happened, because once I started to change the way I spoke to myself, it created room. And when you have room, you can start filling it up with wisdom. And that's when you can start saying, you know what? I think you're freaking awesome. Like, I love you. Like, just speak to yourself as you would want to speak to your children, as you would want to speak to a best friend. Or you hope that somebody, maybe you're lucky enough to have somebody who speaks to you like that in your life. Speak to yourself that way. And it builds, because no matter really where you start, so long as you start doing something, Denise talks a lot about the way you eat and the way that you move your body. You can start there. And that might create space to start then changing the way that you speak to yourself. You have to start somewhere in the way that you take care of yourself, the way you show up for yourself. That makes all the difference in how you then can show up for the rest of the world.
I know that's a lot.
I think you're freaking awesome too. Jeanne, I think you're freaking awesome too. And I'm freaking awesome. Okay, we're all awesome. We're good.
I didn't want to add anything after that, because
I listen to Lauren and I'm like, I learned so much from her. I'm like, I always lean in, even though I'm not supposed to lean in.
Yeah.
Big head.
Sit back.
I don't know what to say after that, because that was everything.
All the things. I have all the things. And what I really
all the things.
How I was able to, like, what occurred to me, the reason I do corporate work now is because I realized two things. One is that we're all people, right? And we forget, like, corporations sometimes think of people as resources or as, you know, headcount, as assets, and they forget that they're like people. But underneath everything, like, we have to remember that we all have to treat each other just as people. And everybody has responsibility to take care of themselves, right? That's half the equation. And the way that we treat each other when we're working, that's the other half of the equation. And it just seemed like a natural transition to me to like focus on those needs that people have, to be valued, to feel like they're part of something, that they belong, to feel understood, and, you know, to be in like a trusting environment that they can count on. Like, those are very basic human needs. And it just seemed like a natural extension of what people do for themselves to be able to help other people do this as well.
So let's have a small little marketing moment for Lauren. What is, you work with individuals as well as businesses and corporations. What would be your ideal client, and or not and or, but also what does it look like when people are working with you?
So my ideal coaching client is as somebody who they've been giving of themselves to family, to work. They've maybe even feel that they're quite accomplished in some areas, and yet they're still either not feeling confident about themselves, or they are still grappling with feeling loved, feeling worthy, feeling enough, or they want to have a bigger impact. A lot of people I work with are people who truly have a desire to impact greater spaces. Maybe like somebody who works with a nonprofit, or a religious leader, or leaders in organizations, who just want to have a bigger impact on the people around them and on their company. So it's who I tend to work with individually. And working with me in that setting, I have workbooks that I've created. I've created these 5 incredible. I was shocked at how powerful these books are. Like, you think you're doing good work, but then when people start using them, you see how much they really help people. And it's just like, wow, like I was blown away and so grateful. So I meet with people every other week, and I don't coach from the workbooks, but I coach adjacent to the workbooks, whatever is coming up for them. And you could find out more about this on my website, lastingchangewellness.com. See, I'm learning. You could find out more about what that program is. When I work with organizations, it could be anything from coming in to do a talk, a workshop. I like to be very interactive in my workshops. I do keynotes all about heart-centered approaches to connecting and to leadership, sort of revamping modern leadership through the lens of love. I call it Pull Up a Seat, another acronym, and it stands for Support, Empathy, Appreciation, and Trust. And I talk about how to make that happen in a leadership setting. So I do workshops around that as well. And it can be an ongoing relationship. I do coaching, I do feedback facilitation, and I do things that are just around connecting. Sometimes it's a one-off, it's one workshop, or it's maybe a small piece of what I do. I started doing something recently that I just love. It's sort of internal networking. Maybe that's a very appropriate use of the word networking. You're creating a net at work, creating internal. A lot of times companies are global now and people never have a chance to meet each other. And you are missing out on all the water cooler conversation. Or companies who have bought many. The company I'm doing this for is somebody who has absorbed 9 other businesses. And we're looking to help them connect. This is specifically connecting women in the organization, but can be anything. And it's a very fun activity that helps people connect in the moment and continue to connect afterward. So, I mean, it could be a moment or it can be an ongoing relationship. My ideal is the kind of client who wants a little of everything. Maybe you're looking for someone to do some leadership coaching or individual coaching. They want different kinds of facilitation, leadership workshops. And they might also, have a need for me to come and speak when they get together and do their yearly events or something. So I love that sort of ongoing relationship as well. That's all the things. Oh, people are still listening.
But Denise, I just really want to thank you for connecting the 3 of us. And
Absolutely.
There's so much more that we can talk about. I believe there's a lot to dive into here, but I appreciate the conversation. And Lauren, thank you so much for your time today and sharing what you know, and just sharing methods and ways that we can love ourselves first.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for, sharing the conversation with me. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening today. Today's show was sponsored by Seaside Solutions, my financial services company. As a business owner, it's easy to be pulled in many different directions, and often taking care of yourself plummets to the bottom of the list. For me, I find myself outside to reground. My time outdoors helps me manage my day more effectively and be more present for my clients. Through this, Discover Rising Tides was born. At Seaside Solutions, we truly believe that education is the foundation of financial wellness. Our primary focus is to provide guidance that is designed to help you achieve your long-term financial goals and visions. Working with a plan allows space for doing more things that you love, like being outside to make the inside better. If I can help you create or realign your plan, or if you would like to be added to my weekly newsletter, please let me know. This week's topic was 5 ways to set more achievable goals. Your referral means the big, beautiful world to me, and if I can help, please let me know. And thank you so much for listening, and see you next time.